me and so hello everyone and welcome to our webinar titled the research process from planning to presenting. My name is Johanna Lawrence. I'm the member of IVPN student from External Relation Committee, and I will be moderating this webinar today, and I'm very happy having every one of you joining us here today. So before we start this webinar, I would like to let you know of the following. Firstly, this webinar will be recorded and you can access the recording on the IVPN network websites, which I will share shortly in the chat box. And second thing is we also encourage you to become part of the IVPN network by joining any of our listavies via the IVPN network websites. So as IVPN student, one of our goals is to cultivate future pharmacists of exceptional caliber by providing them with a range, providing them with a range of professional development opportunities. Those experiences are designed to prepare them adequately for the dynamic and the competitive pharmaceutical industry. I will introduce our speaker today. Our speaker of today's webinar is Dr. Gareth. Dr. Gareth is a prolific scientific author who has published more than 320 articles in peer-reviewed journals over the last 25 years. Those articles include Nature Science Proceedings of the National Academy and other high-profile outlets. His research has been widely covered in the media, and he's often invited to present, talk, and lead workshops around the world. Most recently in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, China, Colombia, Spain, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. In-person workshop in China run by Gareth in 2019 were attended by more than 5,000 colleges. He has conducted thousands of online training, including for Springer Nature, Research Square, Esand Top Edit, and the Charles Worth Group, as well as for numerous universities globally. Dr. Gareth, please welcome to our today webinar.
Wow, thank you so much. It's great to be back. Thank you everybody for joining us. It's fantastic to be here again to do this fourth in a series of 4 webinars that we've presented in this series for IVPN students. So thank you so much everybody for joining today. Don't forget that you can put any questions, any comments that you have into the chat box, into the question box as we go through our event today. So do get involved. Do let us know how you're feeling. Do let us know what you think about today's event. That would be absolutely great. I can see that there's some comments in the chat box already. Let us know how you're doing. There'll be time for a Q&A at the end of our event today. So in our first trainings, we've talked about writing manuscripts. We've talked about selecting journals, good journals to publish your papers in, and we've talked about how to write. So we've talked our way through the academic publishing process. In our session today, we're going to be talking about peer review. We're going to be talking about managing the peer review process, and we're going to be talking about the power of positive communication and how that can feed in to a really positive publishing experience for all of us, because we're all aiming at the end of the day to get our papers published in leading international journals. So here's what we're going to talk about in our event today. Here's what we're going to talk about in our event today. We're going to talk a little bit about what you need to know before you put your paper into the submission process. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can submit your article more effectively. And then we're going to talk thirdly about how you can speed up and how you can manage the peer review process. As I mentioned already, everybody listening to this will get access to a recording. You can put any questions and any comments that you might have into the chat box, and we'll be back at the end for a Q&A. So, what to know before submitting your paper, how to submit your article more effectively, how to speed up that peer review process. And as I mentioned already, the 4 presentations in this series that we've done over the last month for IVPN student are intended to be viewed in sequence. So if you're listening to this and you'd like to go back and listen again over all of the content, I do suggest that you start at the beginning and listen through to all of the presentations in sequence. We've seen this before as well, the academic publishing cycle. We've all got ideas. We're all looking for funding for those ideas. Perhaps you're collecting data. Perhaps you're thinking about a suitable target journal for your next paper. Perhaps you're starting to write a paper. Perhaps you're beginning on that paper writing journey. Today, we're talking about submission and peer review, but the cycle goes on and on and on. We've all got articles, we've all got papers, we've all got pieces of work at different stages of this academic publishing cycle, or hamster wheel, as I like to call it. So have a think about where you are with your particular piece of work. Maybe you've got several pieces of work at different stages of this academic cycle. That's what we're here to do. IVPN student, we're here all of the time, anytime, to help you with issues, with articles, with training, to help you get your work published as effectively as possible in those leading international journals. Right, so let's get started. Let's talk about the first of the 3 elements of this training session today. Let's recap some information that we talked about in the first of our sessions in this series about journal selection and how you can maximize the potential impact of the work that you have, of the research that you have, of the work that you've done, of the research that you're thinking of writing up and publishing in an international journal. We're going to talk about 2 aspects of making sure that your work has the best possible chance of making an impact, and that's pre-submission inquiries to journals, making them. We talked about that in the first of these webinars that I did for IVPN student in this series, and also the use of preprint servers. Very, very important, because we all get letters like this all of the time. Dear sir, dear madam, many thanks for asking whether we would like to publish your paper. It's good and original, but we're simply not willing to publish it. The good bits were not original, and the original bits were not good. Yours faithfully, the editors. Lots of papers get rejected before they go out for peer review because of issues in the writing. And we talked about this in our webinar last week, how you can effectively communicate your ideas as a research writer to your audience. But the first stage of any successful publication journey is, of course, journal selection, finding a great outlet, finding a great vehicle, finding a great publication journal for your research. And many of the most successful writing and publishing academics that you meet around the world, they don't start to write an academic paper until they've decided first on a target journal. One of the best pieces of advice that I can give you as an academic, someone who's worked in both research and publishing, is before you begin to write your next paper, select a target journal. Have a journal in mind. Every journal is different. The scope, the length, the audience, what kind of paper you might write. Will it be a letter, a rapid communication? Very important to self-evaluate and talk to your colleagues. You can't just select a journal blindly. You can't just find a journal without discussing and talking and discovering more about where you're going to publish your work. Talk to your colleagues, talk to your supervisors, talk to your mentors within the IVPN student network, and do make pre-submission inquiries. Write to journals, very important initial step. Get your abstract, get your title, get some of the information that you plan to write up in your paper together and send that in to the journal editor and ask them he or she, would they be interested in potentially considering your paper for submission to that journal? Make those pre-submission inquiries. It's very important. It's a good first step to be effective and save yourself some valuable time. So journal selection. We're looking at the international journals that colleagues around the world use for their submissions. We're building a list. We're ranking that list, maybe 10, maybe 15 journals where you would like to see your work published, built out, making a list, building a ranking, and putting your papers in selectively to the higher impact factor journals first. And of course, as we talked in an earlier session in this series, it's important to aim high with your submissions, but to choose appropriately. And in order to do this, we talk to colleagues, we talk to our supervisors, we talk to our mentors, we find similar papers recently published in our field, pharmacy, pharmacology, that have done the same kind of thing as the paper that we wish to publish. So get involved in an initial journal selection stage for your article in order to be effective, and send out those pre-submission inquiries. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to talk to editors, write to editors, communicate with editors, find suitable outlets for your potential research projects before you begin to write, because there is no limit to the number of pre-submission inquiry emails you can send to editors. You can send 50, 100, 200. You commit to nothing if you write and ask a journal editor if they would potentially be interested in considering your article for peer review in their journal. So the first stage of being a successful writing and publishing academic is making those pre-submission inquiries. Write to editors, write to as many as you like, there's no limit, in order to effectively select a target journal. Reaching out with your abstract and title, and we'll give you a template in order to help you do this at the end of our session today. Writing to journal editors, you've nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. You're not making submissions. Of course, you can only submit your paper to one journal at a time, but you can write those pre-submission inquiries. So why not do it? Why not write to a number of target journals? There's nothing to lose. I've got this template. I'll give it to you at the end of our session today. The other trick, the other tip that we have for effective, successful journal publication with your great research, with your fantastic research, is of course the use of preprint servers. And lots of people have questions about preprint servers. I'm sure there'll be many in the Q&A at the end of our session today. Are they worth using? What are they? And the advantages of putting your work in an early stage onto a preprint server. These are online repositories for academic work. Work appears on preprint servers before peer review and online publication. And you can get corrections, you can get comments back from the community to significantly improve the quality of your work. And a preprint server basically means that your early stage research results before peer review and before publication can be shared with other interested researchers. Peer review happens on the platform if appropriate, and very often journal editors come into the preprint platforms, Research Square, Archive, bioRxiv, medRxiv, and so on, and they look for suitable articles that they might wish to put into their journals. A big issue, a big question that many researchers have about preprinting their work is, will it be protected? Well, yes, it will. Once you put something, a draft, a partial draft, an abstract, even a conference presentation, some slides onto a preprint platform, that's protected by a CC license and a document object identifier. So in fact, your intellectual property is better protected if you put it onto a preprint platform before publication. So this is a good idea, I would argue. Don't worry, your copyright, your priority are protected. There are many different kinds of Creative Commons licenses, but journals come into preprint platforms. They select content that they would think would be suitable for publication in their journals, and often you can get comments on your work from the community, from the research community in your field. So it speeds up publication. A great example, speeds up research. Without the use of preprint platforms, we would probably not have had COVID-19 vaccines as fast as we did have them, because research was being pre-printed. It was being made available to the community on these platforms long before it was peer-reviewed and finally published. So is this a good idea? Definitely something you should look at. In addition to the use of pre-submission inquiries, preprint platforms are a great way of sharing your work with the wider world as quickly as possible. And you also need to make sure that you do have an ORCID ID. This is a unique ORCID identification number that distinguishes you from all other researchers. Lots of people in my country with the name Smith, John Smith, very common name. How do I know that the John Smith I'm looking for in my research area is the right one? How do you make a submission and get your outputs tied to your profile? Well, the best way to do this is to get an ORCID ID number. So do that as well. We strongly recommend that. And of course, as well, we've got lots of training and content to help you with this process. As we talk now in our training session today, initially, again, about making that journal selection step at the beginning of your research life cycle, finding a journal, making pre-submission inquiries, and potentially using preprint platforms to speed up your writing and publishing journey. Let's move on. Let's jump on a little bit ahead and let's start talking about submission of your next article to a great academic journal. And one of the main areas which we find confusion in amongst researchers is in the concept of what is an editor. So we put together this kind of handy field guide for everybody listening to this today in terms of what is an editor, because you might interact with lots of different people in the writing and publishing process who are called editors. And there's you, the author, down on the right-hand side. You might meet a language editor who's there to help you work on the English of your paper. You might meet an academic editor who's there to help you manage the submission process. That's the person who's picking the peer reviewers, the person managing the paper when it comes in at the initial submission point to the journal. That's the person potentially making a decision about whether to send your paper out for peer review or not. And then, of course, sitting above the academic editor in the publishing house will be a journal managing editor. Lots of different people that you might interact with, but we're here to help you understand the process. We're here to help you crack the system. Effective academic communication is your key to managing writing and submission. So when you're ready with your research and you've got your target journal in mind, you've used that target journal to think about your audience, to think about your readers, and potentially to write your paper based on the structure of another article in that particular academic journal, the next stage, the cover letter, is crucial. Writing an effective academic cover letter to go with your paper into the journal at the submission stage is absolutely crucial. Don't waste this opportunity to sell your work. Don't write something boring. Don't write something dull and derivative. Please consider this paper for consideration in your esteemed journal. You've got to sell your work to the journal. You've got to sell it to the editor. You've got to tell the editor why they should take your work seriously. Very important step in the process. This cover letter that goes with your article when you submit to the journal, when you make that submission, is one of the first and most important sections of the work that an editor's going to read. So make it count. Many authors miss this in the submission process. Why is the topic important? Why are your results significant? What's the key result? The breakthrough of your study? Why is this work that you're submitting to this journal an advance on previous work? Why this journal? Editors love it. They love it. They absolutely love it if you talk about their journal. And also, don't forget in your cover letter, when making your submission to that international journal, to provide the editor with a few reviewer suggestions. They may not use them, but nevertheless put them into the cover letter. Now, we get lots of cover letters at the journal that I work for as an editor that look like this. Nothing, no information at all. Authors just submit papers to our journal with no cover letter, and they expect something magic is going to happen. And that is no good. That's useless. That's a waste of time. You've got to put something effective into your cover letter when you share your work with an international journal. We get lots like this too. This is the almost worst kind of cover letter, the boring version. Dear editor, please find our paper enclosed, which we hope you will find interesting. Yours sincerely, Gareth Dyke. That's not useful. That's not interesting. That's not important. It's got to look something like this. Capture the editor's attention with a good, well-written, effective cover letter when you make your submission. Dear editor, please find our original research article enclosed and give them why the work is important and interesting for potential publication in that journal. Very important to make your cover letter count. We've got templates for this. We'll give you those after the webinar. We'll give you email templates that you can use to effectively maximize your article's chances of success in an international journal. Here's what the template looks like. Your information, why the paper is important, why the work is significant, why the work is a step forward in your research field, why it should be considered for submission in that particular journal. Because, as you know, higher impact factor journals have high rejection rates. They do. They reject 9 out of 10 papers. When an article comes in to an editorial office, and we talked about this last week as well, desk editors, those journal editors that we talked about a little bit earlier on in our presentation this evening, they will look at your paper, they'll read the cover letter, they'll read the title, they'll read the abstract, and they will think, does this fit with the journal's scope? Does this article have a clear message? Is it original? Is it important? Is it true? And is it relevant to our readers? You've got to sell yourself to get your work through triage, through this initial stage in the submission process. Of course, higher impact factor journals want to maintain higher rejection rates. So be smart with your submissions. Communication is key. As an author, writing to editors, communicating with editors. Where's my paper? I've waited 2 months. I'm looking forward to an immediate reply is not a good example of the way to communicate with an editor. And of course, polite email communication in all of your working life, in all arenas of your working world is important. I'm writing to ask if I can do something to help speed up my recent submission to your journal. Can I make some additional suggestions for peer review? Is a much more helpful, a much more constructive, a much more manageable way to make your communications to editors count. So we've talked now about journal selection. We've talked now about submission. Let's talk a little bit now about peer review and that final publication stage in our event this evening. How are you going to manage that final stage, peer review and publication with your article as it goes into the journal system? You've picked the journal. You've made your submission with an effective cover letter, perhaps with some examination of preprint servers, perhaps with a pre-submission inquiry to line up a good journal at the start. Now you're going to wait for peer review comments to come back from the journal. And when you get those comments back, take some time to think about them. Take some time to manage them. There's a number of key tricks that you can use to manage comments that come back on your work from peer reviewers. Once reviewed, your paper will probably get either minor or major comments. Okay, minor or major comments. It's very unlikely that your paper will be accepted immediately after peer review. That almost never happens. It could get rejected, but that's much more likely to happen at initial submission than after it's gone into the peer review process, because editors look at submissions and they think, could this work be suitable for the journal? And that, as we talked about, is their thought process at the outset. So your paper should not be sent out for peer review if it doesn't have a chance of getting accepted. Minor revisions come back. When you respond to those, probably the decision after your response will be made by the editor alone. Major or comprehensive comments on your paper, your work is at least going to be offered back to the same peer reviewers. So this influences how you respond, but you've got to be comprehensive. You've got to show your editor that you take the process seriously. You've got to have all the materials needed to make the resubmission. Perseverance at this stage of the process, once you've gotten those peer review comments back, will be key to your success. And also being positive, communicating effectively, making sure that you make everybody in the process feel good. Make sure your editors and peer reviewers feel good about your responses, because if they feel good about what you say in your responses, they are, of course, more likely to give your article a positive outcome. So we would like to thank the reviewers. The reviewer has correctly pointed out. We acknowledge that. We concur. Thank you for the valuable comments. The valuable insight is much appreciated. These comments significantly enhance the quality of the work. Good ways to respond. You get comments on your work. How you respond to those comments in the letter that you send back to the journal, very important. I do not think the reviewers understand it's not necessary to change. We simply don't have data. Repeating, these are bad ways to respond to peer review, because they put people at the other end into a negative mindset. When you make your responses to peer review, be positive, be constructive, be polite, make sure everybody feels good about what you're saying, and put your comments against the peer review comments in sequence. And do it like this, with an editorial summary at the top of your response document that summarizes what you've done to the paper for the editor to see. So the editor doesn't have to read all of the comments. The editor can see what you've done. The editor can make a decision about whether you've responded comprehensively or not. We would like to thank the 2 peer reviewers who worked on our paper for their considerable efforts and for the time they devoted to our work. We've made almost all the changes requested and enclosed a revised manuscript version. Changes to our paper can be seen in red in the main document. Our responses to comments received in review are summarized in this document, interleaved in red. You make it easy for editors, easy for peer reviewers to see what you've done and to see what you've not done. In an example, comment, response. Comment, response. In my opinion, the main issue with this paper, we would like to thank Reviewer 1 for this insightful and accurate comment. We have reworked all the analyses as requested. And there's a minor comment here about the use of American versus British English. Thank you for this editorial comment. We've corrected our paper throughout. You are comprehensive, you are constructive, and you are polite. And this shows the editor that you have taken the process seriously. I've got templates. I'll give them to you at the end of this session for you to do this. Responses to peer reviews. Again, comprehensive, polite, systematic, to show the editor that you take the process seriously. And again, if you're waiting for comments to come back from peer review for more than 6 to 8 weeks, and we get this comment a lot, we get this question all the time, how long should I wait before talking to the editor about my paper? Well, 6 to 8 weeks, a template here. Write to the editor and ask for more information. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm writing in regard to my article, and give the number. This paper has been reviewed, and tell the editor all of the information. You're waiting since this date. Can I give anything back? Is there anything I can do to expedite the process? Often it's because they've forgotten about your paper. Perhaps they're waiting for additional peer reviewers. You can suggest additional peer reviewers. You can give something back. And as we've talked about in earlier sessions in this series as well, what happens if your paper gets rejected? Of course, this happens all the time as well in international journal publishing, but I would strongly recommend everybody listening to this that if your paper gets rejected and you feel that you've been rejected for a bad reason, for a reason that you don't agree with, or for comments from the journal or the editor or the peer reviewer that you don't agree with, then make an appeal. If you genuinely think your research is important, well done, well written, and deserves to reach that journal's audience, of course, you can write an appeal letter to the editor, because the worst that can happen, of course, is that the paper stays rejected. I have several examples of this from my own academic career. Articles I would not have gotten published had I not made an appeal. One in Nature Communications, one in Nature, for example. You come back, you feel you've been treated badly, you feel that the comments you've been given by the peer reviewers don't adequately reflect the contents of the paper. Do appeal to the editor. And again, we'll give you an email template at the end of this webinar so that we can help you with this process. Dear editor, hello and thank you for reviewing my manuscript during your busy schedule. I've made some minor modifications and I've added 2 more authors who also contributed to my paper. This is not okay. Many authors tried to do this. International journals are on the lookout for this at the moment. Paid for authorships, gift authorships, big business in this area. You should not be adding authors to a paper after it's been into a journal system. It's very important to keep this in mind. Journals go for this. They look at this. They would ask you to fill in lots of paperwork. Sending a paper to a journal requires all authors to know about and support submission. Trying to add authors after acceptance immediately causes alarm at the journal editorial office. Any changes, additions to authorship after journal submission will require explanation and approval from all currently listed authors. And as I've mentioned already, because of issues in ghost authorship, paid for authorship on papers, journals hate to have to deal with these situations. And so that's the third part of our training today. We've talked a little bit about journal selection. We've talked a little bit about article submission. And now we've talked about peer review and publication. Don't forget, communication is key. This is how you'll maximize your success as a writing and publishing academic. And we're always here at IVPN Student. If you have any questions or any comments or any feedback, just ask us. We are always here to help. And so this evening, we've talked about what to know before submission. We've talked about how to submit your paper more effectively. And then finally, we've talked about how to speed up the peer review process. And with that, I'll hand back to my colleague, Johanna. Hi, Johanna, how are you doing? And if there are any questions and comments from the audience, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gareth, and I want to express my gratitude to you for delivering this such an incredible presentations. We hope that your insights have been enlightening, and I'm confident that our participants have gained valuable knowledge as well. So we are now inviting the questions from the audience. So if anybody have a question, can you please type it in the Q&A sections? So we had some question here. Someone was asking, Doctor, why the editor will consider our email as they will be receiving a lot of email every day? This is the
That-
first question.
That's a great question. Yeah, thank you. Well, hopefully the way that you write your email will help the editor to answer your email. And if you send it to a big journal, if you're talking to a big journal, you're talking to an editorial office rather than an individual editor. So make sure you make your email engaging as well. And I can certainly help you with that so that your email is eye-catching and engaging, and certainly so that an editor will look at your email. So it's a great question. You have to make sure that the way that you communicate with journals is positive. Really. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question is, how can I look for relevant journal if I don't have any support from someone that has knowledge of relevant journal? Addition, where can I find editors to emails? Are those listed down in the journal website? This is another question.
Yeah, this is another good question. So there aren't that many resources to help authors find relevant journals. One that I'll give you in the chat box is called the EdAnts Journal Selector. Let me give you that, and you can find that. But many journal selection tools are specific to publishers. So it's a great question. I mean, there aren't that many places. I would recommend this one, EdAnts Journal Selector. I don't have the link right now on me, but also the directory of open access journals. You'll find these if you Google them. I think it's doaj.org. It's another good place. But yeah, these would be good places to start. And thank you for that question, because everybody needs to be aware that when they search for a journal using a journal selection tool, probably that journal selection tool is the Springer Nature journal selection tool, or the Wiley journal selection tool, or the Elsevier journal selection tool. It's trying to bring you to journals for your submission within that particular publisher. So be very careful. And thank you so much for that great question. It's a really good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Amna Shams. She is asking how to respond if one journal refused your manuscript and then you submit it in the other journal, but the first journal preprint your manuscript after rejecting it.
Well, this is another good question. I mean, so the first journal pre-printed your paper. Amna, is that an issue for the second journal? I would ask the second journal. I'd look for a second journal that has no problem with accepting papers that have already been pre-printed. And this is often an issue because you pre-print your work, and then of course you're looking for a journal that will accept a preprint, and most journals do. So I wouldn't see it as a problem, Amna. Have a look at the terms and conditions of the second journal and get in touch with me if you have any questions. Okay.
Okay, another question is, how can we get the ORCID and how we will select a server for preprint submission?
Yeah, okay. Get an ORCID by just going to orchid.org. I'll give you the link. Orchid, orchid.org. I'll send it to everybody afterwards. I think it's orchid.org. I can't check it right now. And selecting a preprint platform is also relatively straightforward. I mean, have a look at Research Square. That's the biggest one. Also, depending on your subject area, like medRxiv or bioRxiv. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll give you my email, everyone, so you can write to me. Any questions? I'll put that in the chat as well. Don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn if you aren't already. Yeah. Thank you very much, Michelle. Yeah, you connect with me on LinkedIn. That's also excellent. And we can follow up on any of these questions and any of these comments. Personally, I'm very happy to help anyone with any questions at any time with the writing and publishing process. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the questions. Great.
Okay. I was looking for another questions, but I see there is this. Please, as I remember, there will be assignment who will win first place. He will post his name in the IVPN. I think this is for Zoom leaders. or is this for Dr. Gareth? Like, I remember there will be assignment who will win the first place. You will post his name in IVPN page. Please, could you tell us more about the assignment and the records and the data of the 4 sessions and the certificate? I think this is for Zoom leaders. Doctor, I have another question. Like, is it possible to submit to print single work in different journal at one time?
Can you publish the same paper in more than one journal at one time? No.
Yeah, it's impossible. Okay.
No.
There is a question here like, where can I find someone who is willing to read over my manuscript as I improve my academic writing skills outside of my university, since I know that at this stage my writing is not yet up to par? Thanks.
I'm happy to do it. Yeah, just drop me an email, anonymous attendee. Let us know. We're happy to help you. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. You got my email. You can find me on LinkedIn. Great to give you a hand. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, if you still have questions, you can type here for Dr. Gareth to answer them. And Doctor, I had another question like about the peer reviews. If you need to, you need to propose who need to review your work. Who is someone who is most preferable? Like, you can choose maybe someone who is doctor or anybody can be.
No, I mean, you should choose people who have publication experience, research experience in the field. And that would be important because journals won't send papers usually to peer reviewers who are a bit junior. They would like to include early career researchers in the peer review process, but that's often done with mentors and so on. So I would look for colleagues in your field who have publication experience in your research area. Hopefully people that you know, potentially people already in your mentorship group that you've reached out to in the past. But yeah, like that's how you select peer reviewers. Great question. Thank you.
Okay, so Doctor, another question is like, maybe you submitted your work and then the editor has replied to you and they told you like, your work is not original. So what are you supposed to do? And you know, like you really did it. Yeah, you did your work really, it's original, but told you like, this work I don't think it's original. So I think, how do you do in a case like that?
Well, if they've said multiple times that the work is not original, then I mean, the only thing you can do is try to send it to another journal, but you may come up against the same peer reviewers again. So, I mean, if they're saying the work is not original, they're saying that based on some reasoning, right? I mean, maybe you need to repitch the paper, reposition the paper, like reset the hypotheses in the paper. But yeah, like I would just, if that was me, I would go to another journal and see what outcome I get with a different journal. Thank you for all the great questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another question here is, how can I approach writing a commentary article? Do those require me to explain my literature reviews and the process I use to select the article? I want to describe how can I delineate a commentary from original research, particularly in this research is not based on lab research or data collection from questionnaires, etc.
Well, like with all of this, like the best advice I have is to find another paper that recently was published in a journal or the journal that you would like to publish your work in. That does the same kind of thing as the article that you would like to write. So if you're looking to publish a commentary piece in a particular journal, you should get some previously published commentary pieces from that journal and see how they do it. Copy the style. You know, that would be my advice in that particular situation. I mean, each journal's different. Each commentary piece is different. Each article is different. But if you look at previously published pieces of work in your subject area, in that journal, published in that journal that do what you would like to do with your paper, I think you'll be in good shape. Like writing a grant, you want to try to find grant applications from that funding agency that have previously been supported. Thank you for that question. Great question.
Okay, another question from Mohammed, while he is asking like, if my paper is rejected by a specific journal, can I get back by another one after sure of practice? Will the journal editor accept it or not due to I have been rejected once?
No, they won't know necessarily that the paper's been rejected from another journal. I mean, you might hit the same peer reviewer or peer reviewers when you submit to the second journal, but no, I mean, if your paper's rejected by one journal, you can send it to another journal and it will be reconsidered again as a new submission. And they won't know, the journal editors will likely not know that the paper's been submitted somewhere else. Great question, Mohammed. Thank you so much for it.
Okay, I think this is the last question from our question and answer sections. If there's anybody who has a last question for Doctor, I see there's a question here like, are there any platform that can help me with the editing process?
Are there any platforms that can help me with the Yeah, there are lots of platforms that can help me with the editing process. Grammarly, Writeful, ToWrite, Curie, PaperPal, Trinker. There's a whole list of AI tools, for example, Anonymous Attendee that you can use to have a look at helping you with the editing process. But again, get in touch with me. I'll send you some links. Thank you so much. Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think I've covered all the questions, and once for more time, I'd like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Gareth for the insightful presentation. Additionally, I would like to express our thanks to everyone who joined us today. Your presence is sincerely appreciated, and we hope that you found the presentation to be high informative, and was very happy to have you in our webinar today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gareth, and for everybody who attended today. I think, Doctor, you can drop the presentation slides in the chat section so people can download them. And I think the rest, the Zoom leaders are here and they will give some instructions.
Thank you.